to the actual web in most cases. So now the big problem is our data doesn't actually stick around from one page load to the next. We could fix that with local storage. I'm not going to do that in class just to rip it right back out and do Firebase. There's a link that I think I posted to the afternoon, not the morning. So let me put that in the morning as well. Here's a link about local storage and how to use it. It's one of the first Google results for that, but there's also some bad advice out there. This article that I just posted from Smashing Magazine is really good. It tells you everything you basically need to know. So local storage is pretty straightforward to use. You can just get to it from local storage or window.localStorage. And then there are methods on that called getItem and setItem. So local storage itself looks like kind of a bunch of JSON. Has a lot of methods on it. LocalStorage.clear clears it all out. LocalStorage.setItem sets something, and you just pass it a key and the value. So setItem breakfast scones. Then I could say LocalStorage.getItem breakfast and get back scones. Only issue, you can only store string data. So what if you have, say, let meals equal that, and then I say local storage set item meals to meals. Then I do local storage get item meals, the string object. So it calls toS or to string on it, converts the object to a string, which is just object, which is not helpful. So all my data got blown away. Who got past this issue? Stringify. So stringify and parse are the two magic things. So JSON. We need to turn it into JSON because that is a string representation of an object, essentially. So if we say JSON.stringify on an object, we get a string that looks just like the JSON. So that looks more like what we want to save. So local storage set item meals instead of just meals, JSON.stringify meals. Then we do local storage get item meals. And we get back that string. But that's just a string. So we can't do that and then say dot lunch. That's not a thing. So we have to turn it back into an object. And for that, we use JSON.parse. JSON.parse, thing that we loaded out of there. And we get an actual object. So JSON.stringify turns an object to a string. JSON.parse turns a string of JSON back into an actual object. So if you need to store anything like an array or an object in there, you're going to have to use JSON.stringify and JSON.parse. Anything else tricky you had to do? You needed to load that stuff out of local storage right when the component first loaded. Did anybody use a lifecycle function for that? Anybody run across the concept of lifecycle functions? Yeah, Will? Yeah. What'd you do?
I used component did load and component will unmount. Component did mount and component will unmount.
Okay. So let's look. React lifecycle functions. Okay, here's the documentation for a React component. An overview. The component lifecycle. So each component has several lifecycle methods that you can override to run code at particular times in the process. Methods prefixed with will are called right before something happens, and methods prefixed with did are called right after something happens. So notice they're methods that you can override, which means they're defined in React.component, So to override them, you need to be extending that. So this does not work in stateless functional components. This only works in full-blown components that actually inherit. Just like if you need to use state, you must inherit. If you're going to use the lifecycle methods, you have to inherit as well. So if there's something that you need to happen right when the component first loads, you're going to have to use the lifecycle method for that. If you need something to happen right before the component goes out of existence, same deal. So there's a will and a did version of several different things. Mounting is one of the things that happens. These methods are called when the component is being created and inserted into the DOM. So component will mount will run right before the thing is inserted into the DOM. Component did mount is run right after it's inserted into the DOM. So if the things already need to be on the page before it runs, you need to use component did mount. Updating, component will receive props, component did receive props. Should component update, component will update. All these are things that you can use to, if you need something to run basically every time the component re-renders. So, for example, what makes the component re-rendered? A change in state will make that happen. A change to one of its props will make that happen. So if we have a couple notes in here, when I click this now, note form re-renders, right? Why? Well, when I clicked on this, current note changed up on main, right? And that's being passed down as a prop to note form. So what actually happened is note form's props changed, which made it redraw. So you could watch for that to happen using component will receive props, for example. So you can always look this stuff back up to see exactly what you need to do. But these are things you're going to have to use if you want something to happen at certain points in that component's life cycle, which you need to do if you're going to do the local storage thing and you want it to work reliably. And we also need to do it when we do some of this Firebase stuff. So we'll get into this in a little more detail, but that's a very quick overview that these things exist. So just like the constructor, if you need to override what happens in React component, you just need to write those yourself. So if you just put component did mount and write something there, it will automatically happen at the right time. Because somewhere in this base class, somewhere in React component, it's automatically calling this method at the right time. So as long as you name your method the right thing, it's going to run at the right time. What did you do in component? You said you used component did mount or will mount? Did mount. And what did you do?
Then I just loaded it from localStorage and then parsed it.
And then updated state, or yeah, okay. And you said you used will unmount? Is that what you said?
Yeah, but I had to add an event listener in the window for refreshing, or had something pop up.
And what did it do?
It added an event listener before unload because for some reason it won't actually unmount the components if you just refresh the page.
Oh, right, yeah, true. And so what were you trying to make happen when you did that?
Then I just saved the state to the local storage.
Okay, so you saved it to local storage when it unmounted.
Yeah.
Okay. You could also basically do that every time you save note. So every time you every time you update the array, you could just do it then. So you could do it then. You can do it every time you delete. Because yeah, that's true. You can't necessarily count on unmount running. Because if you refresh the page, then yeah, that's not going to work. So you could just save it to local storage every time your array changes by just doing it inside save or delete. Yeah, that works. So again, I'm not going to actually do all this here because we're going to do the Firebase thing instead. Questions about it though? We could probably do it. It wouldn't take long. Let's just do it real fast. Why not? All right, so when you save note, we update notes here, and we could also just window.localStorage .set item notes, and we'll set it to JSON.stringify notes. Let's watch that work. Add a note. Add another note. Let's have a look at localStorage.getItem notes. All right. Seems reasonable enough. If I did a JSON parse on that, I get my array. Yeah, looks good. Cool. If I delete one of them, I've still got both of them though, right? Because that also updated state, and I didn't do it again. So I need to do it there too. So remove current note. I set state with the new array. I also need to update local storage with the new array. Try this again. Oops. Now I've got 3 notes. There they are. Delete one. And I only have 2. So local storage is being kept in sync now, from the look of it. But I refreshed the page, and while local storage still has my notes, it did not put them back on the page. So we need to do something when this thing first loads. And for that, if you're going to do any lifecycle functions, I do recommend you put them like right after the constructor. Component did mount. Called immediately after a component is mounted. Setting state here will trigger re-rendering. Component did mount. So we'll load our notes from local storage. Say const notes equals window.localStorage.getItem notes. That's going to give us a string, right? So we need to parse that. What happens if we call JSON.parse null or something? I just get null. Undefined. That gives me a syntax error. Oh, that's okay. Okay. So if notes, I'll say if notes this.setState notes. If I didn't load anything out of local storage, then I don't need to do anything. Save that. Getting all kinds of exploding. Notes map is not a function. I did not parse it, did I? I talked about it, then I didn't actually do it. Okay, there they are. Delete one. Delete one. Refresh the page. That one is still there. Let's add some more. Refresh the page. Still there. Cool. If you wanted the same note to load back up every time, you could also save current note to local storage and load that every time if you wanted that to be persistent across refreshes. But yeah, that basically does it. Say again? Can you do it with will mount? Let's... After it's loaded on the DOM, right? Let's try will. Seems to work too.
So this one's before.
Yeah. So I don't know if we can visibly see the difference. Let's see. Let's look very carefully. I really can't. It's so fast. So basically, if you do will, it won't even render the page until those are loaded. So I guess it could, theoretically, it's rendering the page without those loaded. So it's rendering it with the blank array first and then quickly loading them. But it's happening so fast you can't even tell the difference. But yeah, will and did both seem to work fine. Since we're not doing anything in here that needs anything from the DOM to have already loaded, will mount should be fine. And it's maybe the slightly better choice. But as we saw in practice, they looked exactly the same. Cool? Store notes in local storage.